So the first section we're going to discuss before our guest gets here is the Pentagon leaks. Is it real or is it not real? A lot of people have different opinions. I do think it's a real leak. But I also think there's definitely manipulation. And I put a few different opinions in this. So the they're really pissed off about the Ukraine war plans, right? That said how many dead there were, how many Ukrainians, how many Russians. They say that this has undermined the security, the national security. This is what they always say about anything. And they're really pissed off about this. And we're going to go through a couple of examples, but I wanted to lay it out first as to what the mainstream media says. And then I have some RT articles as well that have talked about it. But here's the Daily Mail.
I got the New York Times up on. I got the New York Times up on the archive.org. So here it is.
Okay. So you guys can see what they say. These classified documents that give a snapshot of the time the American and Ukrainians view as of March 1st, the timeline. And these are NATO plans, and they appeared on Twitter and Telegram in different aspects, not entirely. Now, media has them. A lot of the Western media have them, but they have all decided to keep these documents away from the American public. That, to me, is one of the most important factors, but also that these leaks say a lot of what we already knew. That's how I felt about the Twitter files. That's how I feel about this. I do feel like there is a tendency right now to release information by high-level officials or accounts or people associated with the Pentagon, because a lot of people are really distrusting the government more than ever. So they do have to give you something. And this is just like my thought process. If I was in charge of a psychopath, in charge of ensuring our national security, meaning ensuring that we continue this empire and war machine, there's certain things you have to do to placate to the public. Now, what has been released seems to be actual material, right? And according to the Pentagon, they're investigating who may have been behind the leak. And the military analyst said the documents appear to have been modified in certain parts from the original format. So they're trying to sort of say, well, they undermine our security, but they may have been modified and blah, blah, blah. So that's just what the New York Times talked about in the article. But I do want to move on to the other one. Did you have something to say on that, Pasta?
No. I mean, when we get to the point of what we feel they are, controlled release of information, narrative management, actual real things. I mean, my personal opinion is, does it really matter? And I'll explain that as we go along, because what real push, fam, have they had, as the American public had against this war? Yes, some of them have done it to politicize this shit because they can point the finger and say it's Joe Biden's war. This would have never happened under Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, there's not a real pushback for this particular war. And if they can continue to find a way to get more money funded to Ukraine, to embezzle more money from the United States citizens, why not? I mean, who's really pushing back against it, fam, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and well, one of the big reasons why this was seen so negative for the Pentagon was that they predicted that Ukraine's air defense system would be exhausted by the 23rd of May, which is a little over a month away, and that this would allow Putin to send fighter jets, and the $2 billion in U.S. aid would just not be enough to continue Ukraine's supporting Zelensky's army, in spite of literally everybody in the West giving them money, every NATO entity. So that's kind of what really did it for a lot of people. That's a really big deal. But we've been talking about this for a while. So have people like Scott Ritter. So many people have been talking about it. And by the way, we will have Brian Berletic on next Friday. Not this Friday, but the following Friday. So he's going to talk about some of these things. I've been trying to get different people on. It's just with our schedules, it's sometimes difficult. But so a lot of people have been talking about this. None of this information is new. We've been talking about Ukraine's army being exhausted, right? We've been talking about Ukraine's army being completely the lies that they tell you, the amount of soldiers killed, it's so much more than what the Western media portrays. So this isn't like new information, right? And so this is what people are pointing to as some of the reasons why this is controlled release of information. Now, they also talked about how what else? They detailed how let me see if there was something I wanted to point out.
We're staying on the Daily Mail.
Yeah. I just wanted to. So there was a batch of the documents that were talking about the U.S. national security interests pertaining to China and Israel's Mossad, and that was also being shared. Again, nobody can really legitimize the authenticity of these documents because it's so easy to fake documents nowadays, and there's so many ways with Photoshop and stuff to do things. I mean, there's just like so many ways to even put different people on people's bodies and all that. So it's definitely something that they're saying they're doing an investigation, but the Pentagon doing an investigation into something like this is like bank robbers investigating themselves. Like, it's just, we're not really going to get a clear cut idea of the situation. So it's up to the public and journalists to really analyze, and analysts to really see if this is actually any sort of valid information, right? And it also talked about spies being deeply ingrained all over the world, from U.S. intelligence in Russia, in other parts of the world, that there are CIA agents everywhere, right? And the one Pasta's pointing to is the details of internal discussions among senior South Korean officials about U.S. pressure on Seoul to keep supply weapons to Ukraine and the policy of not doing so. There's so many like little things, and we're going to go over some more of it. But again, this is really just information that if you've been paying attention to any sort of show that does foreign policy analysis or breaks down what's going on in the Ukraine war, you already know. You already know that we have the State Department is embedded and has been sending spies here. One of them reportedly was a journalist, a journalist that's being held right now. That, they destroy the Nord Stream pipeline as Seymour Hersh. Another thing I want to point out is Seymour Hersh himself. The way that the establishment reacted to Seymour Hersh's findings and how he was told by a source, and he wrote all of this out in an article and assessed everything he assessed about who destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines, with Norway having its role, with the UK having its role into really blowing up these pipelines under the guise of just military exercises. Well, the way the establishment reacted to his reports was extremely negative, to the point where they dismissed him as a journalist and called him a blogger.
Fam.
He's a longtime journalist, and that's not something in the US that's known. Like, being a blogger in Russia, is a popular thing. Like, it's almost like the same as a journalist, but in the US, being a blogger is an entirely different thing than being a journalist. And he is an award-winning journalist. He's an investigative journalist, and they referred to him as a blogger and said he was a whack, and he's some sort of Russian, bot and whatever. They gave him the usual, smear jobs, but they literally dismissed him right away. Whereas with these documents, they're admitting to them rather quickly. Now, of course, these are documents, but it's interesting, Pasta, to me, the difference in how they're reacting to those two things.
The term blogger in the United States is more or less like saying that he couldn't make it as a journalist, so he's just blogging on his own. As in, when Russia, they called him a blogger, but yet he was like a war correspondent. We saw that particular. I forgot the journalist's name. What's his name? I'm so sorry.
The late
gentleman. but you see him with the war helmet out in the field talking about things.
Gladly.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it is like, I'm glad that you kind of pointed that out, fam, because it is two different things.
Right. And so the Pentagon is apparently in panic. Now, this is RT talking about it. And they, according to what they've been saying, a lot of them are in panic and saying they're going to ramp up security, right? They're saying now we can't just, we have to be extra careful. And this has actually been verified that they've said that they're going to be extra careful with who they release information to. The clearance level is going to be lowered. So this is what they're saying. And that the Washington Post reported saying that they were trying to assess the damage from the dozens of leaks, national security papers, and they were wondering how the breach went unnoticed for so long. I just find that really hard to believe that there would be a breach that would go unnoticed for so long, a breach that would be that damaging and detrimental to them. And so, again, these U.S. officials told the Post that the Pentagon leadership has restricted the flow of intelligence in response to the leak. And it's a high level of panic among the top brass, and that they were stunned and infuriated by all of this. I mean, I just don't know how that could possibly happen at this point. So I just have a really strong doubt as to how they could be stunned. Like, I do feel like obviously this had to come from somebody within in order for that to be true, right? You can't, if you're stunned that this could happen, it's because you have a small circle and somebody within that circle breaks. And the way they do this, because this is how any sort of organization really that wants to be successful in covert functions, they have different groups, and they formulate these different groups to where it's so if one person lies or something, you can still find ways to protect the information from the other cadres, so to speak. And this is how, like, pretty much it's actually mimicked from a lot of like left organizations, the way they do this. And so it's really weird to me that would happen unless it was somebody, of course, from within the Pentagon. And so, okay, so that's pretty much it in terms of like, nobody knows if these documents are real. But they did talk a lot about foreign policy involving the United States, China, the Middle East, and terrorism. And they talked, these documents have been released, have been found, and Reuters, the Washington Post, and the New York Times have been the ones really pushing this. And again, as I said, the Pentagon Leaks source may be an insider. I think that's a given the fact that the way the information was decimated, it's likely to have been somebody from within.
The fam, they did say that it was released on Twitter and Telegram first, correct? And then the New York Times picked it up, or
it was released. It was in a lot of like the 4chan groups. It was a lot in those threads first, and then Telegram, and then made its way to Twitter. So a lot of information that's released in Telegram, because I do have a Telegram channel and I follow other Telegram channels. Some of it isn't always accurate. So sometimes people don't do, because it's Telegram, they don't do their due diligence and check like the sources of stuff. And I have found a lot of just like fake stuff on Telegram, same as on Twitter, where we're going to talk about one video that literally went viral and it's completely like a fake video. And like, so because people just don't do the diligence of searching. So it's become kind of like lazy type of journalism, because sometimes it's hard to search things when it's quick. And you know, like people share things, but it's like, it's hard to sometimes, you know, like double check. So many, there is actual fake news, right? And I'm not going to like stop people
there's a lot of
posting
confirmation
things.
bias, fam. Right? There's a ton of confirmation bias out there. So people don't tend to go deeper down the rabbit hole. They get the information they like and they stop right there and then they put it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to stop selling off China to China all the farmland. They own too much of the farmland. Well, they're like number 14 in countries that own actual farmland. Canada's number 1. Canadian companies own way more farmland than China. And so people don't look down that rabbit hole. All they know is that China owns some farmland, and therefore they stop there. Oh, China owns us over here. Well, no, China bought up a lot of our debt, but we own the printing press. We could just print our own money and give it to them. So what do they really own? They don't own shit. So people do tend to get that confirmation bias. Stop right there and don't go any further. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No. You're absolutely right. So again, just because the documents were focused on Ukraine's military strategy and Mossad and what's going on with Benjamin Netanyahu and a lot of these things, they do think it's somebody from within. Now, I want to move on, fam, to a few of the threads.
You do have
because I do have this video.
The Twitter. You want to do the video?
I believe the video's next, right? Because
you want to do the video?
Yeah.
All right, guys, you know what to do. Famalam is in the house.
So let's just watch this denial, because basically Fox News, and this is what I want to say before we play the video. A lot of people think Fox News is like in opposition to CNN, MSNBC, but I do think they each play their role, meaning one is for the right and the CNN and MSNBC and all that is for the liberal, just the same way the culture wars play out. So it's no surprise to me that Fox News as a whole, right, is going to say this. Now, we can talk about Tucker Carlson and his role, but this is just one aspect of that. So let's take a look at what this woman says.
You guys do know what to do. Share us out. If you're a member on Rokfin, go over there, share over there. Mariah Myers is hanging on out. You're a premium member. Let's do that. If you want to watch it on Rumble, we are rocking over there too as well. And, of course, we're on YouTube, and we have Derek Bros later on. This is the Convo Couch. Pasta Jardula, Fiorella Isabel.
National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin, live at the Pentagon this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Dana. The revelations have sent shockwaves through the Pentagon and the national security establishment, and sources tell me could be worse than the Edward Snowden leak because of the real-time effect on allies, their trust, and the war in Ukraine. Fox News has agreed, along with other news organizations, not to publish the leaked, highly classified documents, which were discovered last week. Details about the scope and scale of the leak remain sparse.
National Security Correspondent Jennifer Griffin, live at the Pentagon this morning.
Okay, so just this is from my experience as, an anchor. So she's bringing in a correspondent that also works for Fox. She works for Fox. She's bringing in a correspondent that works for Fox, and the correspondent is at the Pentagon, and she's just saying her whole report. The extent of her report is to say, essentially, for the most part, I know there's more. The extent of the report is to say, we're not going to release the information on this. We're not going to release the documents. We've decided, a group of us have decided not to do this. Your job as a journalist is to give this information to the public, even if you say, we cannot at this moment verify if these documents are 100% authentic. So these alleged documents allegedly say XYZ about the Ukraine conflict, about Russia, about everything, right? These documents allegedly say that. You can say that. You can have a whole report on that. You're fine, because you're saying these documents allegedly say that, blah, blah, blah. But why would you, as a journalist, because I know this isn't them, this is Fox News Corporation controlling what they're allowed to, and of course they're going along with it, but that's part of it, right? So we can't release these documents. We've all come together and decided we're not going to release these documents for the public because of the just the level of threat to our national security. And also, by the way, Pasta, the comment about these being worse, potentially more dangerous than the Snowden leaks, to me, that says a lot, right? Because Snowden's leaks were absolutely monumental. And this is why Julian Assange is literally in prison right now, where we not celebrated, but literally condemned 4 years since he's been in Belmarsh. And there's been 4 years since that. And even before that, people have been, pushing for his release. But you put that next to, WikiLeaks and the the releases that happened during WikiLeaks and why Julian Assange is in prison, and you start to think like, how could this be any more disruptive when it's already what we know? So I'm just questioning a lot right now, because that seems to me like some sort of talking point that you were given, just as somebody like, these are worse, potentially worse than the Snowden leaks. I really don't see it as being worse, because with Snowden's leaks, it was information the public had no idea about. It was information that really, for a lot of people, it really put, that's some of the reasons why we're all journalists, some of us, because it's like, it really shed a light onto what our government did. But for this, it's like, yeah, we know Ukraine's army is like, so it's just weird to me that they're saying that. I don't know if you have something to say about what she said.
I think a lot of us, when it came to the fact that the NSA was spying on us more than they're spying on China and Russia, a lot of us suspected, but there was no proof whatsoever. One of the biggest, hottest takes away from these leaks, right? Did these leaks talk about also the fact that there were NATO troops inside of Ukraine? Well, we've already saw video on that. We've seen actual video a year ago on that. So it wasn't a surprise whatsoever. A lot of people can say that collateral damage was something that they assumed happened, but they never saw it with their very own eyes. So to me, to say that these leaks are bigger than Snowden revelations or Assange's revelations, it's just, to me, is a crock of shit. But it's something that somebody will go ahead and repeat and say regardless. I was on Misty's radio show the night before the Assange event, which was crazy, fam. I'm sure you heard about it. But in between one of the breaks, Patrick Henningsen, who's been on both my shows, both these, and talked about several things. I love his insight. I met him at the Rage Against the War Machine, but he had even said in this little clip in a commercial that it looks like this is a little bit of a red herring, and that's a little bit of a fugaziness. A lot of people feel that this is a controlled release of information so they can then pivot over to Taiwan, find a reason to kind of exit out of there. Remember when we have the Afghanis papers that eventually came out, and they said it was all colorful graphs and everything, and lawmakers kept on signing off? I think they're trying to throw something out there like that so they can indeed, in fact, pivot over to Taiwan, and this would look like it'd be a great excuse to do so. So therefore they don't get themselves in trouble, as much trouble. Like, we had to. Look what's going on. We got our secrets got exposed. Now Russia knows what's going on. We have no choice but to get out.
And not even pivot to Taiwan only, but like to be able to control the release of information to the public, right? Like the fact that, now we can't allow this, even if it's not very much that we didn't know. And I think the way this anchor and this correspondent release the information just shows that, like, they really don't know. They're just saying these things. They don't know what they're like talking about. Like, they literally don't have information. They're just being told to say this. And so to me, first of all, that depicts journalism is entirely dead in the United States. I mean, you can't tell me that if Julian Assange had got a hold of these documents, that they wouldn't be released. You know what I mean? Like, that's the difference between that journalism, which is journalism, and PR, because they're basically trying to cover the tracks or trying to form a certain narrative. I would say rather form a certain narrative, an agenda for the State Department, for the Pentagon. And that shows you that journalism is dead in the United States. For all the times the United States says, Putin is a dictator, Assad's a dictator, Russia is China, they're dictatorships. Well, okay, but like, even if that were true, what are you doing right now with any sort of information, which, by the way, we already knew, right? So, and one of the last couple of things before we bring on our guests that I do want to go over is Denis Pushilin. He is the head of the Russia's Donetsk People's Republic, or the DPR, and he has his doubts about the authenticity of the documents. He looks at them as sort of a red herring that could be an attempt to actually mislead Russia. And he said a number of countries, well, this is in the RT article, if you click on that. So a number of countries have since started to doubt the authenticity of the leaked documents, including Ukraine, which has portrayed them as a Russian ploy to derail Kiev's planned counteroffensive. Others have pointed to inconsistencies and inaccuracies presented in the files. Nevertheless, the Western media seems to be actively trying to create, and this is a big part here, an information tsunami about the topic, according to Pushilin, who suggested that it could mean the leaks may have been deliberate. He said, who knows? This could be the preparation of the global community for a possible reduction in support for Ukraine on the eve of the highly publicized counteroffensive by the Ukrainian armed forces. This is what you were alluding to, Pasta. They have pretty much lost this war. We've talked about this. So they're trying to sort of reduce this support for Ukraine. He also said that regardless of the content or the true intentions of the West, Russia's task is to continue working and not respond to the provocations. He added that if the West was trying to mislead Russia, it would not succeed because the bitter experience of our interaction has taught us to treat everything with a significant amount of skepticism. Okay. So, so that's something, that's a breakdown that I saw that I could really, I think, points out to the valid questions in these documents, that why are they trying to make such a big deal of this? Oh my God, when does the Pentagon, when does the State Department ever admit to being fooled like this? Right. Yeah. It's just that something just does not sound right to this. And I'm asking people, of course, to draw their own conclusions, but that is my conclusion. I do think it's wrong of them to hide it from the public, but I do think they're doing that. They would do that anyway if it was something real or not, but I don't think they would make it such a big deal if it wasn't. And so this is another take that I saw, that this person, professional hog groomer or Bidette marksman, says that far from being an embarrassing breach of sensitive intel, this leak has all the signs of being a deliberate disinformation operation by the U.S. Here's why. And then he goes on to talk about this. You guys should go on the thread, but I'll read a little bit of it. He says, he talks about where they appeared. They appear on 4chan, Telegram, and Twitter. And there's a pic of the documents. The first and most obvious indication that this was a deliberate leak is how quickly the White House jumped to confirm the authenticity of the docs, which immediately kicked off a media frenzy of sensational headlines throughout the West. This is exactly it. The West never does this for anything that's actually valid. Look how they treated, of course, Seymour Hersh, as he points out as well. So these are things that I came to my own conclusion about. And also, I think other people are seeing this as well. This is, they refuse to talk about what Seymour Hersh has said. They call him a blogger, things that we've talked about. And many of the documents, he says, appear to relate to logistical planning around the rumored Ukrainian spring offensive, which includes an assessment of total war losses by both sides to date. And so you can see that the total assessed losses, Russia moderate, it's Ukraine moderate. And I do think, those numbers might not be exactly accurate.
Completely wrong. If you believe anything that Scott Ritter or Douglas McGregor has to say, 16 to 17 and a half thousand. Yeah. That's like, you're just kidding yourself. Unless they're that naive, they're just fooling themselves.
Yeah. Because it's actually reverse. Yeah. They're saying there's been more losses by Russia and than Ukraine, and that's just not the case, guys. But as he says, the leaked documents estimate Ukraine's losses at only 15,000 to 17,000, a number that is far below what the EU itself publicly admitted was the case last year, shortly before hurriedly retracting. So remember, she retracted Ursula von der Leyen. But Ukraine's proxy war logistics aren't the only docs that were supposedly leaked, with other content pointing towards a much broader attempt to implicate several U.S. allies in a secret military. Hold on, I was reading it 1 second.
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Fair.
In secret military deals with Russia, one of the more interesting targets appears to be the UAE. And then the other thing I want to mention about that.
The Emirati government.
Yeah, so it says leaked docs imply that UAE is deepening ties with Russian intelligence, a claim the UAE wasted no time in categorically rejecting. And so why would the UAE be a target for a U.S. disinformation campaign? Well, because of a few reasons. He talks about the Syria UAE meeting, which is a completely valid assertion. The historic diplomatic relations between the KSA and Iran. So this is in the OPEC stuff, right? So these are very valid points as to you can't just take leaked documents and not look at the geopolitical context of everything that's implied. So more info on that, we'll be following that along, but I don't think the documents are necessarily illegitimate. I think they were real leaked, but I do think they are not telling the truth 100%. I do think they're controlled information, meaning that information is real information that the Pentagon has, but it's not 100% accurate, and it's being released for a specific narrative to be formed by the public. And it's a form of narrative management. I don't for a second think that they're just willingly creating the sensationalist headlines and saying, oh my God, these are a big deal, if they actually are a big deal and if they aren't actually prepared to release them. So.